Howdy folks, TJ here. Yesterday's video, or the last video I made, I showed you how I was progressing along with my AmigaOne X5000 computer. I left it at the point where I was booting up successfully from a MorphOS stick, and I left it at, it's a time to install it on my computer. My intent was to also make a video on installation. I have not done that because I ran into some snafus. I think anytime you get in the dual boot of anything, there's always some voodoo that goes along with making it happen. And I ran into many pitfalls. It's a good little name for a video game, because there is one. Pitfalls along the way. So I tried 5 or 6 times, and I start the video, and it just wasn't working because I ran into a problem. Problems were, obviously this AmigaOne X5000 was built for AmigaOS initially, and so the hard drive on it, which I did not want to affect, boots up AmigaOS. A second hard drive is put in, second video card, and then now I'm going to install MorphOS. So there's a little bit of gambling there. Anytime you're starting to partition hard drives, do things like that, you worry that you may screw something up. So I didn't want to overwrite anything. I didn't want to cause any problems. I think if all I was doing was taking said computer and I had no existing operating system on it and I wanted to go completely MorphOS, for example, it would have been a cakewalk. It would see the drive and it would just do what you ask it to do. The settings that, say, I'll do it for you kind of thing. But instead, when you go into select manually, that's when things started changing for me. So in a nutshell, I was having a problem manually partitioning the drive that I wanted to put this on. It was just having a battle from saving partitions that I was telling it to do and it not doing it, or freezing the computer, or seeming like it does it, but when I get to the next screen, it doesn't see the drive to install MorphOS on. So I did a lot of battling with that. And I think with all the things I was throwing at it, I was about there. But I started working with Skateman. He is a fellow friend on the internets, on the Amiga sites. He has done this before, and he also had said that, yeah, I think he said getting it installed properly, naming it something different, there could be some snafus along the way. So we did a little video conferencing via Discord, and he was seeing some of the things I was going through, and I think some of them probably were, scratch your head like, yeah, I don't remember, seeing that, but we got through it. What was funny is that after I contacted him via Discord, I was holding up a camera pointing at what I was trying to do on the screen and then typing on a keyboard that was way over here and the monitor's over there. I saw on the desktop actually a partition of something that wasn't there previous day that I've been trying to do all this stuff for previous hours. So I think I had allowed one of the auto things to format the drive, and it did it, but the name wasn't what I wanted it to be, but it was mounting a rogue partition on my desktop. And when I was chatting with him, I go, wait, that shouldn't be there. That's not part of the MorphOS install. And I go, it must have done that from when I was throwing everything but the kitchen sink at it. So it actually, I think I was on the right trail. And what I'm going to throw out there is, and there's going to be no step-by-step on me installing it, but I think what happened is that I let the auto, it says, let me make you basically an 8 gigabyte partition. You put the little dot in there and it's going to make one on the drive that you select. You still need to select the drive. By doing that with the name that it gave it, DH0, I didn't want it named that. So that's why I kept using the manual method. But I let it do it accidentally, I think. Or like I said, I threw everything but the kitchen sink at it. And it made one. I then went in, and since it can now see it, the manual partitioning program, HD configure, whatever it is, I was able to go in and actually change the name to what I wanted it to be. I tried to make a second partition, and it wouldn't work. He was on the camera the whole time, but it wouldn't let me do a second one. So we said, let's just see if we can install it on this first one, because somehow successfully we named it DH0.1. I wanted it to be something different than my Amiga hard drive, which is DH0, just in case. He said, there could be some conflicts or something. So I did that, and it let me rename it. It let me install MorphOS on there. And so I went about my way. I then ran into problem number 2, that all I could get out of this thing was 640 by 480. Or on this TV, 4K resolution, which was very hard to see. There was missing pixels, so I could barely read stuff. And so it's a little tricky also for monitor settings. There's a monitor, I'm going to call it control panel, which I was going into, but it was hard to read, and I couldn't select anything different. But there's also screen modes. So kind of like with Amiga OS, there's a screen mode preference that you could go in and add monitor or edit settings. So with this help of Skateman, I went into the screen modes, edited the one that was 640 by 480. There was a whole bunch of choices that came up, and I could barely read them, but I said, I'm going to throw out and select this one that looks to be 1920 by 1080 and hope for the best. If you never want to not hit save before you test. The problem is when I click test, my system would freeze, so I couldn't test it. So I chose one that I thought would work. I hit save. The screen went bonkers, blanking in, out, small, big. It was going crazy. I said, okay, well, I probably just screwed things up. Let's shut it off and reboot it. And if it doesn't boot, I'm going to have to connect it to a different TV, and hopefully a different TV or monitor brings up video where I can do all this, or if worse comes to worse, I have to reinstall everything. Luckily, the one that I selected was usable. Later on, I figured out it wasn't the right one because the screen syncing wasn't quite right. I was getting some weird pixelations up here. But it gave me enough to go up and go back into the screen modes, because it was staying stationary now, and choose a different one that was better. And now I've got this is not MorphOS, by the way. This is Amiga OS running Candy, and I've got the spacey star background. I do love the candies. Anyway, so I was able to play with screen mode. So I ran into lots of snafus. Trying to make a video that runs into all that took hours for me to feel through, throwing things at the kitchen sink to get it to work, is hard to do. So I opted, I'm not going to make an installation video. If I ever make one again, I'm going to go off of my thought that if I have to partition a drive from scratch, I'm going to let it do it, and then I'm going to go back in and rename it to something I want, and then install the OS. That's going to be my goal. And then if I want to make new partitions later within MorphOS that I could view and use, then I can do that. That's the whole thing. So anyway, I ran into too many snafus. So I want to show you a dual boot. I've now got my AmigaOne X5000, able to boot directly into whatever OS it was last booted into. It remembers. I can also go to an early boot screen and select whether I want Amiga OS or MorphOS. So right now I've got Amiga OS running. I'm going to turn off the computer and start it, and we'll see if it boots back up into the existing operating system. That's a little hiccupy. If you've got a USB stick that's got an installer on there, I couldn't shake and I couldn't get my Amiga OS to boot again successfully, even though I told it to go to Amiga OS. So there's a lot of quirkiness. There's a lot of oddities that you can run into. You've got to be the type that wants to get it done and know enough to where you can kind of get there. And sometimes you need to ask others' assistance. And just by doing that video conference with Skateman, I was able to get further than what I was coming to. I felt like I was on the edge, and I guess I was, because I successfully mounted a partition on the desktop that I needed to change the name of, and I was able to install the OS on. So it was very odd. But anyway, let me turn off the computer. Well, then it should boot up in the Amiga OS. So I'm going to reach up here and shut off the computer. We'll wait a few seconds. I'm not the type to turn on and immediately turn something else back on. Sometimes you can screw electronics up if you're too impatient. So I've given enough time for the fans to slow down, and we're going to turn on the computer. Now, if all goes well, and it's probably going to come and slap me in the ass, it's not going to boot into Amiga OS, but we'll see. It should. It has been since yesterday. And so let's see what happens. So I get the normal boot screen. What was happening when I had the USB stick and I was doing the USB reset from the command line in the early boot screen, it would give me this, but then it would try to launch MorphOS from a boot stick that was no longer in there, even though I did a USB reset. It was very odd. Just USB and AmigaOne X5000, there's a little voodoo. That's what I'm going to say. So anyway, this is my normal setup. So this is a 4K TV made by TCL, I think 42-inch, 43-inch. and it does relatively well. I normally use Amiga OS in what they call QHD or 2.5K. It's not 4K. It's 2.5K, some people may call it. So now it's counting down. It's got the bootloader Amiga OS. So things look like they're working as they should. And if all goes well, it should boot up into Amiga OS 4. I'll get the startup chime. And there we go. I didn't even turn on the mouse. So, so there's the mouse. Let me focus in on the screen. Just so I don't know if I've been coming in and blurring out. Sometimes if you're close to the camera, it kind of starts. My iPhone 14 Pro starts coming in and out, waffling. Anyway, I've got this beautiful, I love Amiga OS in terms of the simplicity of it. It just makes sense to me. I've cut a dock down here of the common applications. Like, let's just go on a little tangent. iPhone, you can, or Android devices, they're too complicated because there's too many programs on them. People have pages and pages of shit. I don't want that. I want an iPhone that just has my core things, or Android, whatever it is, that I'm going to use day to day. And if I want to grab the occasional little doodad game, I'll do it. But I don't want so much stuff clogging it up. So I keep a relatively peaceful Amiga OS experience. I've got my hard drive icons up in the upper left. I've got a main dock down here, which has very limited. I've got Media Vault, Amiga Amp, Emotion, which I use for playing my videos, TuneNet, Ami PDF, a shell, a multi-view, and a notepad. That's all I got down there. On my right dock, and I do like the docking solution for Amiga OS. It's fairly intuitive for me to use, and I can put things in, I can remove things. It feels comfortable. Anyway, up on my top right side, I've got Dopus 5, Ami Store, if I need to spend my money and buy stuff, Updater, Odyssey, which is the main web browser for Amiga OS, and Wookie, because I'm on IRC chat quite a bit. Down in the bottom, I've got a calendar, and up on the top right, I've got a clock. Very simple, and I can go over here and double-click on my system, and it's got my files, and I keep things relatively clean. I do like the candy, so I've got candy running in the background. I think it just gives it a, and you get a little spaceship, and it comes up. It's a working desktop environment, which I like, and I just enjoy that GUI, that experience with candy. So anyway, we're going to now boot it up differently. So we're going to shut off this computer because I now want to use MorphOS. Why would I want to use MorphOS? I've already been tinkering. Wayfarer is a much better browser than Odyssey in terms of functionality. On Odyssey, I cannot go to Google Drive and go to my Google Calendar, do Google Email, because I get a note back, sorry, this web browser is way too freaking old. You can't do diddly squat. So I can't do any of that. And that's what's kept me from using my AmigaOne X5000 for work, for business. Wayfarer, even though slow, technically the limited I threw at it allowed me to go to Google. Email, I could use the Google Mail on the web page. I could go see my calendar, and I could exchange or grab a file that I put on there on my Google Drive. I didn't test everything because I use Google Limited, but let's go ahead and boot up. We're now going to do MorphOS. Now the hiccup that I am running into, I've got this beautiful RGB keyboard down here. It will not let me get into the early boot window. I can hit escape to my life content. It will not work. To get into the early boot window, you normally hit the escape key on the keyboard as soon as the animation for your desktop comes up. So I have to use this cheap little $6.99 keyboard I purchased from Fry's Electronics before they went out of business to get this early boot window. So kind of stupid. Maybe I could try. I think one day I hit escape and return multiple times at the same time, and it got me into the early boot window, but then it started scrolling down like I was holding a key down with some data and funkiness. Anyway, if there's a different key on different keyboards to get into the early boot window that you've detected, let me know. Post down below. But anyway, let me focus in on the screen again in case this is coming up a little hard. But your main early boot window gives you some key things. Did I just change the orientation? No, I think that's all right. Start Amiga OS, start MorphOS, start Linux. The three core operating systems that you can install on AmigaOne X5000. There's boot options, system info, and command line in case you're a command line junkie. Or you need to do like I did the other day, go into the early boot window, like I did, and go to command line to reset your USB so I can install MorphOS. I want to go ahead and just use the keys. Now I can use my keyboard now. No, I still can't. So in the early boot window, for whatever reason, it doesn't like my RGB keyboard. Once I'm in the MorphOS, it's fine. Down here, I had to use this cheap keyboard. Anyway, I'm going to select Start MorphOS, hit Return. It's going to blank out. Now, there's 2 video cards in here. As you know, RX 580 for Amiga OS. You have to use a different video card for MorphOS. This screen will now stay the same. I've got 2 HDMI cables piped into the back. I've got to tell my TV now to go to the other one. So I'm going to select the TV and I'm going to go up to HDMI 2. And if all goes well, I should have MorphOS on there. MorphOS boots really quick. And there you go. I've got now, and I still have some weird artifacting. Or it could just be the design of MorphOS. No, I'm getting some strange lines. So I don't know if this is the video card, if this is my settings that I'm doing, but I am getting some weird, and you're probably not picking them up, weird little gold lines and stuff in here. So it's very odd. So I don't know, again, if this is the video card. I purchased it secondhand. It's a used card. So for all I know, it could have issues. But this is what I'm getting. I'm getting these little strange periodic glips of a line here, little gold line. You're probably not seeing it. And some artifacting of these little dots. Anyway, I do have MorphOS technically running. I'm going to have to see if I can finagle and work out of this weird issue. If I can't, maybe this TV and setup is not best for me for using MorphOS. I might have to try to use something else. But anyway, I do have it running. So I've got a relatively big desktop. And let's just go. The one nifty thing about this, see this icon up here called Networks? You can actually connect to a NAS. So things that I've done so far, when I double clicked on this, Networks, it looked on my network and it saw that I had these things on my network. This is all automatic. It was built in the MorphOS 3.18. It sees my NAS. I can double click on it. I can type in my password and see stuff on my NAS. It's very slow. Is it NAS? 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 Everybody's got their own thing. I like to say NAS, but sometimes I'll say NAS. Anyway, NAS is like nitric oxide, right? Something like that. Anyway, so I can access my network and grab files from other things, and it was just instantaneous. It worked. I didn't have to do any setup. I just had to make sure my Ethernet card was selected, and then I can get on the network. Because for whatever reason on this computer, it saw 2 Ethernets, and one of them didn't work and the other worked. I think I might have had I don't know why it was grabbing 2. Anyway, it was weird. I had to go in and switch it to a different Ethernet port. But anyway, so yeah, I could go to my NAS and grab files and transfer stuff. It was very slow. It could be my settings. It could be the AmigaOne Ethernet. It could be my router. It could be the NAS itself. It could be any of it. But I have access to it, which was really cool. The other thing was Wayfarer. So on your MOS, do people call it MOS? MOS? Or MorphOS? Do they always spell it out? What's your thing? Because I see a lot of people say MOS for MorphOS. Are you calling it MOS or MOS? To me, I gravitate towards MOS. Anyway, applications. Double click on applications. And down here is Wayfarer. And I already launched Wayfarer. It is a pretty good web browser. Like I said, I was able to go to my Google documents and do stuff that I couldn't do with my Amiga OS. So right out of the chute, that is a kudos and a benefit to using MorphOS if you're going to use it as your all-day main computer. Even though it was slow doing it, it was still workable. So I've got MorphOS running. And now I'm using that RGB keyboard down here. So very strange, but yeah, it's one of the oddities that I'm having. So I wanted to go to, let's see how quickly it goes to Apple. Apple.com, return. So the web browser, on other computers, it would have probably been in by now. So it's thinking, it's doing, and it does work. Now, I have not went to YouTube yet. We're going to do that together. So I'll just say instantaneous things that I've enjoyed doing. Wayfarer, and checking my Google Drive if it worked. And dual booting, going into the early boot window and select what OS I want. And if I leave it at turning off this computer at MorphOS and turn it back on, And if I remember that, I turn it on, it'll just boot right into MorphOS, which is cool. So Apple.com. Let's go to YouTube. I haven't tried YouTube yet. We'll end this video with YouTube. I have no idea what it's going to do. YouTube.com. Let's see if it does it. YouTube is coming in. And we'll click on whatever video's there. I have no idea if it will allow you to play a video within the web browser at a lower resolution and it not be choppy and terrible. I have no idea. But yeah, it's not speedy. Right now and I know there was an update to Wayfair since I've done this installer, but still, this should give you a general idea of, okay, you go into YouTube, what's the speed going to be like? Most everyday computers, even your little iPhone, you would have been there by now and already selecting a video. So it's not super speedy, but if you're patient and it's your one and only computer, I can see this being benefit to be able to dual boot in the different operating systems. So yeah, it's still thinking. It's up to this. It hasn't drawn in the graphics. Let's see if I can go to my YouTube channel, Mac Society, because I don't want to play something of somebody else's. And it is slow. Like I said, I just hit return. It's thinking. I think I typed it in right. YouTube.com/Mac Society. TJ Ferrari, yeah, it's finding it. So you're living here with an experience of what you may expect on this is an AmigaOne X5000, 2 gigahertz power PC. I'm guessing this is speedier with a Power Mac 2.7 gigahertz multi-core, even though I think it still only uses one core MorphOS system. Anyway, it says your browser can't play this video. Let's click videos. Maybe I'm going to have to learn how to play videos with YouTube. Maybe it's not going to let me play any video that's 1080p. You think it would give me some other choices? Well, so this is the Amiga One. Let's go ahead and start this. It drew it in. I'm clicking it. Maybe that first video, for some reason, in the main screen, it can't play for some reason. Your browser can't play this video. So, edit video and join. I'm just going to hit play for the hell of it. So, apparently, if your goal is to use this to easily view YouTube videos with the Wayfair as it comes pre-installed, it's not working for me. So maybe there's a workaround. Maybe there's a way to make MPlayer play what you click on. I don't know. I haven't learned that yet, but that's some of the things that you're going to deal with when you're working with MorphOS, Amiga OS. They're not super web super computers. I'm going to put it that way, because on your cheapest of phones, you could do all this now. On this computer, these computers, I'm not experiencing it. I'm using it for the first time, and that would have been something I would have done. I would have went here, I want to play this video, and it's saying your browser doesn't support it. Do you have to trick the browser into using it as a different thing? Maybe with like an Odyssey, you can say it's an iPhone, and it thinks it's an iPhone, so it brings it up and lets you play it. I don't know. But anyway, that's it. So I've successfully booted up. Now let's shut down. And then we'll end this video with, we're going to shut down, is the computer shut down. And then we're going to turn on the computer and see if it automatically boots into MorphOS, and then we'll end the video. And I'll chat as it's doing that. Give it a few seconds to let the fans whir down. And start. So now if all goes well, you're going to not see the, well, I'm going to go back to it. So if you want to see the boot up process, for some reason, like you want to get to the early boot window, you have to go to the HDMI that the main computer's on here. If I'm not going to do that, I believe I've not went there, and I just left it on my HDMI 2, and it will eventually show the desktop. So let me go back here and go up to computer HDMI 2. Let's see if it actually boots up. It's waiting. It's waiting for, it normally takes the AmigaOne X5000 like 30 seconds or so, I think, to decipher what it's going to boot up from, unless you break into the early screen and select otherwise. So I'm just going to let it go and see if it eventually brings video up of my MorphOS booting. What's interesting, I can normally tell via the fan of when MorphOS is booting, and there you go. The fan kind of simmers down a little bit. So anyway, even though I'm getting this weird graphic glitches. It could be the TV. I may try to connect it to a different thing and see if I experience the same thing. It just may not be perfect setup for me on this screen. Anyway, I am successfully doing it. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video. So if you're one of those that wants to get more out of your AmigaOne X5000, I can see some benefits to having both of these OSs on there. And maybe even a third one. There may be a web browsing experience within Linux, which I don't have installed on here, that may be better than both MorphOS and AmigaOS. So I may try that down the road. But until then, I've got MorphOS booting. It did what I told you it was going to do. There's a little voodoo along the way that you have to make this all work. But now I've successfully done it. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. I'll make more. I think as I get familiar with this, and if I get this TV working better with this particular setup, I'll make some more videos with my desktop experience, programs that I'm adding to this, launching, running, maybe YouTube, get that working and show you videos on here. So thanks for watching. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.